Hello, my name is John Eisenstark, and I'm the head of worldwide business development for the AWS HR and workforce transformation practice. I wanted to invite you to another episode of our SaaS DNA series, where we talk to leaders from top SaaS companies and find out what it takes to build and scale a global SaaS organization and what constitutes the DNA of that organization's culture. I'm pleased to host Sandeep Chaudhary, CEO of PeopleStrong. PeopleStrong is an advanced technology partner of AWS and the most trusted HR tech platform for enterprises across Asia Pacific. Sandeep's an experienced business leader with deep functional expertise in human capital and business management. He's also responsible for the growth and reach of PeopleStrong's work in HR technology in their global markets. And great to have you with us today, Sandeep. Sandeep, PeopleStrong's had a fantastic run over the past 3 years, hundreds of top brands as your clients. And as partners, AWS is really excited as you have scaled and grown. But can you talk us through your success story and what's really helped you to get here? What problems were your clients looking to solve, and what makes you and what you do unique?
Well, thank you, John. It's a pleasure to get into this conversation with you and with AWS. Let me just take a step back and very quickly talk to you about when we started, which was way back in 2005, 2006. By a bunch of first generation entrepreneurs who were doing fabulously well running HR for very large enterprises. At that point in time, there was a lot of focus by organizations and large enterprises in centralization of information and creation of shared services. And that's fundamentally where PeopleStrong as a service organization was born. This was the first Indian HRO organization. Along the way, we saw a massive shift and a move that saw the creation of the system of records, which is really where the enterprises started to move a lot from the Excel sheets into software. The legacy technology, as we essentially saw at that point in time, had a lot of interdependent architecture. It continued to see low adoption of employees. The next wave, as we saw, was when the SOR, the system of records, started to migrate onto a workflow. And this is fundamentally when PeopleStrong Technologies was born purely on cloud. And this was cloud-based, this was modular in terms of its architecture, it was mobile-first software, and all of these started to become the norm. When we started to address our audience, which primarily was sitting out of the emerging markets of India, Southeast Asia, and other parts of Asia Pacific, we saw a relatively unique behavior with the Asian workforce. Most of them were millennials. Many of them had already adopted a digital first lifestyle as consumers and were quite expecting a very similar, seamless experience as employees. So when they came into an enterprise environment, they didn't like to be treated any differently than what they were actually being targeted and treated as a consumer by the entire explosion of Internet of Things that was parallelly brewing very, very fast. And that's fundamental to how organization like a PeopleStrong saw that to be a massive white space. Along the way, we started to talk about our comprehensiveness because we started to integrate a lot of that employee experience into one that was disintegrated in multiple ways. We started to bring in significantly more agility onto how we want to be able to solve for the large enterprises. And the definition of large enterprises in our context was a lot of conventional organizations that had massive legacy. And lots of new age companies that just in a matter of 5 years had actually done what a lot of companies had taken about 20, 30, 40 years to do. So there was a lack of process, there was a lot of scattered data, there was a lot of broken points in employee experience and data analytics and so on and so forth. And that's really what we've essentially been trying to solve over the last 7 to 8 years as we've grown very, very rapidly in the space of HR and now, which is soon evolving to be work tech.
That makes a lot of sense. Can you help us understand, I guess, the large enterprise mindset when they're looking to invest in HR technology that really is going to help automate and optimize how they run globally? I mean, I guess specifically, the larger the organization becomes, the more global the organization becomes, those use cases are becoming more and more complex, especially with growth, post-pandemic growth. What are your both current customers and future customers thinking about? What are their concerns, and do you think that a new phase of tech adoption is going to evolve from this?
Yeah, clearly, I think the large enterprises are getting very, very serious about their employee-first strategy. And this has become even more compelling because it is literally impossible for any of the large enterprises to deliver to a customer-first strategy if they're not providing a similar or a better experience to their employees. And now look at the current technology landscape and the entire environment that they're currently sitting in. So you're likely to encounter one of these two cases whenever you step into a large enterprise, like we did with a very large conglomerate like an Aditya Birla Group or an Amara Raja, or even a company which just in a matter of 12 to 13 years has done what many organizations would not be able to do in the lifetimes, like a Paytm, a unicorn in India, another unicorn like an Oyo, and these kind of companies. So one environment that you would encounter is many systems, disintegrated analytics, which fundamentally means that the leadership really doesn't have one cockpit view to take data-driven decisions. Broken employee experience, because to check my payroll, I go into one. To go and mark my leave time and attendance, I go into another. To go and do some kind of stuff on talent management, I'm going somewhere to update my goals, somewhere to go and log in my feedback, and so on and so forth. So it all really doesn't come up. And by the way, what's really gotten accentuated in the pandemic is the element of mounting costs of just holding on to multitude of these systems that have now gotten created in an enterprise ecosystem. The second situation that we encounter very often is there's a large organization on a business-wide ERP, and HR has just actually come in along with it, which has seen lower adoption. It's very complicated integration. It's relatively very less effective in terms of its utility. There are many bolt-on systems which have essentially come on over a period of time. And again, I think the issues that a business or an employee or an HR department actually faces is quite the same. When a PeopleStrong started to look at their distinctiveness of how is that we are going to be solving this problem in a very different way, we fundamentally at the core, John, are individuals that understand HR exceptionally well. So we are HR by domain who are using technology to be able to first simplify the work life for HR, take away a lot of operational processes, automate them in a manner that they run very, very intuitively. And then the second element is how do we fundamentally partner with an employee to create that very seamless experience for employees who are willing to engage on one singular platform. And today, even more because of the distributed workforce that we are seeing. Clearly, 50% of the real estate, as we know, being occupied by enterprises is already redundant. So very clearly, the one that is going to emerge is going to be a lot more of a hybrid work environment where there will be a significant part of people that will not come into work every day. And in that scenario, your HR or your work tech fundamentally becomes an extension of your organizational infrastructure that you access digitally. So it's almost going to be quite the same as me walking across in the corridor, knocking on your door, taking an idea, collaborating on a task or a project that I'm essentially working on, going and clearing certain bottlenecks, which has been impeding the speed of execution for my colleagues and so on and so forth. Just that it's all going to happen virtually now on an HR tech. So if I only provide you with modules which are relevant for you as an individual, but not relevant for you as a manager to be able to execute on the work and the goals that have been assigned to you as a department leader or as a person dedicated into that department, that collaboration doesn't happen, that contextual, conversational elements around project management, faster execution, etc., are all getting compromised because I'm working remotely, then HR tech is fundamentally not able to deliver to the promise that it ideally should. And those are the elements where there is significant amount of intelligence which is actually coming. I need to be nudged more often if my HR tech actually understands my behavior quite the same as how an Amazon will understand my behavior as a consumer. And that's where I become a lot more functional, I become a lot more efficient, and somewhere actually HR tech is helping me find the balance in this very chaotic world where the lines between work and life have completely been blurred.
Well, and not only that, one thing I would suggest that you think about is that business psychologists for 25 years have proven the correlations between the types of service an employee gets internally and the impact that actually has on end customer satisfaction. So a lot of times, I think the premise of work technology and HR technology is to better serve the employee, better improve their employee experience, not necessarily just to retain them or make the business run better, but it really does have impact to the bottom line for the business overall. And that research has been done for 30 years by lots of psychologists. So
and you're very true. You're very true that psychologist's point of view was only extended to employee engagement. Yep. And now I think we're taking it further, maybe a few inches ahead, and saying it's the overall employee experience. And the employee experience is not just going to be managed in the conventional sense with one HR Spock for about 200 people, but how is that we can actually deliver that one-on-one experience. We've seen that in service industry, very direct, in hospitality and healthcare and so on and so forth, but even very, very direct when we've gone down to servicing the blue collar, the factory, the store workforce in retail and manufacturing and industrial organizations. It's actually very direct even in those environments.
Absolutely, and actually, I think it's primarily because the traditional work tech industry has ignored those populations too. It's not, they focus much more on professional roles, much more on millennials, but they've really left the holistic view of the enterprise behind. So I think what you're doing is really smart.
And there was a good question that he asked, how has pandemic kind of changed that bit? While pandemic has actually changed a lot, right from variabilization of workforce to many other trends, but the fundamental discovery that organizations have had is the penetration and the digital lifestyle that is actually adopted even by a high school graduate. So it's not just about the white-collar executive population that is very smart working on the mobile devices, but it's a lot more about the blue-collar, because they've essentially been able to leapfrog many elements to do everything on their mobile. And that adoption, just realizing that with one of our manufacturing companies, when most of the world was in a lockdown situation, that the penetration of mobile phone with the blue-collared workforce was in excess of 97%. It is just that you have to be agile enough to configure your platform in local language so that the adoption is significant in that category. And the moment we did that in flat 72 hours, they could check in about their whereabouts, if they're healthy, if they're safe. And the moment there was an opportunity to bring back that workforce into factories, they could create that rostering programs, and all was being done digitally in a very, very seamless way.
Yeah, no, we see that across our customers. That is really, I think that's the biggest learning from, hopefully it's the learning as we have post-pandemic life. But it's one thing to say, well, a lot of, AWS says, that the pandemic drastically increased cloud transformation, but I would argue what's been done is we've drastically increased cloud adoption, and that transformation is yet to come. And I think that's where organizations like PeopleStrong and all these other HR tech companies, the challenge is making these these services and features that people were forced to use become more natural. And it sounds like you've done that. That's actually that's a great story.
Thank you.
Back to my questions. Let's see here. So actually building on that, I'm ahead of the curve. The last 2 years have really seen an accelerated adoption of HR technology. As the technology curves move from adoption to transformation, how do you and PeopleStrong see this space evolving further? And are there changes that you're anticipating, as the new normal starts to, evolve? What do you think work life is going to look like?
First of all, John, we actually believe that we are living in the new normal. This is really how it is going to be. If we believe that there is a post-pandemic world, then I think we're making an assumption which is very incorrect, that we will, or rather, we all just kind of desperate to go back to our previous ways of working, which would be very detrimental to everyone, the industry, the employee category, and unfortunately, we would have come out learning nothing out of the pandemic. So this is really the normal that we are talking about. In this, I think businesses have certainly taken an opportunity, in fact, not just leapfrog, but a pole vault to variabilize their workforce. That fundamentally means that there's not going to be 1 or 2 or 3 categories of employees that will actually be engaging with an enterprise. There would be a whole host of the talent landscape that kind of opens up. You will see multitude of employment relationships emerge between the employee and an employer. Now, everything that you essentially end up doing for those categories of employees, right from how you want to be able to record the amount of time that they've logged in, how you've created an environment which is only output focused and not input focused, how you're essentially going to be processing their payroll. Is that just going to be a weekly or a monthly, or can individuals actually choose the time intervals on which they want to be recorded their time and be paid for that? It could be half a day, 1 day, it could be the entire day the next day, it could essentially be the week after that, and I can essentially choose how the payment essentially needs to be made. The similar concern that I shared with you around is input focused. In that environment, how are you essentially going to be creating a performance management system which enables that individual to have that clarity of goal and then be able to execute very seamless around that? That's one big element that is essentially going to be shaping the future of workforce as we essentially look at it. And there are similar changes which are spoken about and massively anticipated. A lot of them have already been set into motion around the impact that it will have on the work and the workplace itself. And we've kind of alluded to some of this in the previous points that I mentioned in response to some of the questions. The second is, now it's not just going to be about the system of records being on a software, but how do we bring in more and more intelligence onto that software? For me to understand the pattern, the employee behaviors, and be able to service them a lot more. I'll just quote you a very simple instance. We came out with talent operating systems smack in the middle of the pandemic because we believed we had to become a lot more personalized to an employee's talent management journey. And in that, we figured out that there were so many disintegrated data points from a time that an individual was hired into the firm, the annual performance records on that person, to the kind of learning that was being asked of that individual, and several learning management platforms that were being thrown at the person, to how we were trying to curate his or her career aspirations and so on and so forth. And now the talent operating system at the core is empowering an employee to make decisions on what kind of career opportunities are available in this organization for me. What is the gap between my current and desired competence? What kind of learning should I essentially be consuming to bridge that gap? Who are the other people in my enterprise who've made that journey before? And I can understand what's been their learning and their career pattern. What are my current peers consuming as learning? And how much of time would it take for me to get ready for that potential role that I aspire for? Now, this is becoming hugely personalized for an employee, and imagine yourself to be a leader who's looking at filling up a potential job today. At a click of a button, if you can get a response, who are the people in your company who are interested and ready now or would be ready in the next 6 months to pick this role up? Isn't that fantastic? You save a lot of cost. You don't have to go out looking for talent when you know that you're actually having some of the best talent interested and ready now or in the future within your own enterprise. The success rate of getting someone to do that job from within is going to be significantly higher than you going and looking for someone who's at best 50% ready culturally and from an experience standpoint to go and fulfill that new role. Now, that to us is making the entire organization move a lot faster on the talent decisions. Now, this is possible if I'm not relying on judgments, if I'm fundamentally relying on data that the system is throwing back at me to take smarter talent decisions. And I don't have to bring in like 20 people for them to create a biased judgment around how many of those decisions should actually be taken, which has been the environment of our decision making so far.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. Actually, to follow up on that, really to be a digital workplace, I think really involves looking at the employee journey and the candidate journey at really every level. And that's not, and while that's the function of HR, really finding ways to extract data from that process is really the much more in the purview of IT and CTOs and CIOs. How do you see CHROs and CIOs partnering to deliver solutions in large organizations today? And who do you think really needs to own HR technology for large organizations?
So, clearly the power couple out there is the CIO and the CHRO at this point in time. And we are seeing a greater influence being yielded by the CHROs in the decision of selection of HR tech, because I think they are putting out the vision of being an employee first company. That's really the take that they're essentially getting from their business owners. The CIO clearly is a very important stakeholder that needs to bring in a very careful assessment of various technology platforms and how they can all integrate or actually be replaced by one comprehensive agile one that can help them deliver to that employee first strategy. I guess the vision gets created by the CHRO, and a large part of that actually gets co-executed by the power couple of CIO and CHRO. Increasingly, it is important for the CIO to step into the shoes of an employee while taking many of those decisions, and not just look into the budgets and how can I make do with a lot which is already available in the technology ecosystem of the organization, because that's really where the compromise mindset has always emerged from. Do more with what's available. And increasingly, HR needs to step into the shoes of the CIO, because one of the most critical future skills required for the next gen CHROs is for them to become technology individuals and technology experts. So fundamentally, the reluctance of HR to solve problems through tech and seeing that as a lose of control is a false or not the right place to be in. In fact, they need to see how technology can enable them do a lot more with a far leaner HR department, simplifying a lot of the operational work that they were originally consumed in, and elevate the value proposition of HR to its employees and the business. And since we are an enterprise grade focused HR tech firm, we've seen and encountered a dramatic change in the role and what's expected of the next gen CHRO by many boards and many CEOs as we've been working with them over the last 3 to 4 years. And we predict this change is just going to be a lot more dramatic over the next 4 to 5.
That actually makes a lot of sense. And I like the term next gen CHRO. I may borrow that going forward. I guess lastly, what trends are you seeing globally for enterprises when it comes to growth and people strategy and work life? And then I guess lastly, if you were to give recommendations to senior leadership in ways to enable growth as organizations are trying to regain momentum coming out of the pandemic, what would those recommendations be?
One really is, this is a brilliant time to challenge the convention, because transformation is not something that you would embark upon every 2 years. At best, you will embark upon transformation once in 5 years and spend the rest of the 4 years actually executing onto that transformation agenda. And for that to be enabled, it is extremely important for you to present all the alternatives that you would essentially have in front of us. And some of them are just going to be very simple, staring into our face, just like how 85% of the things or the muscles that we've discovered in this pandemic are the ones that always existed, but we never just used because we were only just relying and staying in our comfort zone. So just presenting alternative approaches to how can I reconstruct my workforce? How can I reconstruct my work? How can I reconstruct my workplace? And fundamentally, your imagination can be a lot more innovative if you were to bring in how technology can help me solve, enable, and deliver to this transformation agenda that I'm trying to visualize for this enterprise. It becomes a lot more pragmatic and practical the moment you bring and start asking questions. Why can't technology do this? And it's not always going to be about you setting yourself and adjusting to that technology, because that was the convention. There was almost like a concrete block of technology, for a lack of a better analogy, that was put in front of you, and you had to design your workflow to fit into the norm of that technology. In the more agile, configurable systems like what PeopleStrong is promising to its customers, it is about the technology actually fitting into your workflow. If it makes sense for your employees, if it actually helps you execute faster from a business standpoint, that's the right thing to do. And you should have a technology platform that is agile and can configure very quickly on its own without having to escalate timelines or cost to be able to help you deliver to that. There have been innumerable examples that we've essentially created around that agility with our enterprises. One of that is our PaaS, which is platform as a service that we essentially offer along with our HR tech, that has enabled organizations to create apps and technology platforms on the go, which has helped them solve a very transient problem. In the absence of that, they would have either never done it or done it at a very long and an expensive way. And I think that's where organizations are seeing that agility come in, and they're fundamentally seeing how there is more intelligence that can be brought in if you're using technology to solve every part of the puzzle. And that intelligence actually makes it far more relevant for you to back those decisions rather than constantly drive your car looking into the rearview mirror through benchmarks of how many other my peer sets in the industry have done it. And if they've done it, maybe it's a good idea for me to experiment with it. It should be your tech and your data that should actually help you drive that decision. And your competitive advantage is if you had that idea and been able to execute faster than your competitors.
No, thanks. That actually makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been a really great conversation, Sandeep. I appreciate you spending time with us. And I really look forward to seeing the types of success I think that PeopleStrong has waiting for it in the future. I think you guys are in for a really great run. So good luck.
No, thank you. And I certainly have to be able to thank AWS to be an outstanding partner as we essentially moved from 500,000 to now nearly touching 2 million employees across 9 different countries. And we clearly are not stopping anytime soon. So to have a very stable and a secure platform and a partner like AWS is certainly a matter of strength for PeopleStrong. And thank you for that partnership.